Hey everyone, my name is Sudeep. This is just going to be a lay debate lecture for outreach. If you have any questions throughout, just let me know. Raise your hand, unmute, uh, whatever you want to do. But yeah, let's get started. So, what is lay debate? Very simple, just convincing the everyday person. So, random guy on the street, your mom, your dad, really good people to practice with. Uh, just trying to get them to want to vote for you, to give you the ballot and think that your side is more correct than the other. And something you'll notice off the bat is that it's a very subjective thing to do. Uh, it's not something you can guarantee. Like with tech debate, a lot of the times it's something more, objective. But with lay debate, you're definitely not going to win them all. It's not really possible. You just have to sort of put your best foot forward. That's the best way to sort of go about it and get as many ballots as possible. But what you do in lay debates. So generally, throughout, make sure you're polite and respectful. It's really big. I've known debaters that like go to the restroom in the middle of the debate. Uh, that's not going to fly, right? Like, sure, like you can ask and they'll say yes, but if you do something like that, it's definitely going to make it seem like you don't really care about the debate as much. You didn't prepare for it, maybe. That might, make them seem or think that you're not someone they'd want to vote for. So being polite and respectful first, just always do that. Don't do anything that would sort of jeopardize the judge's opinion of you. The next thing you do is you need to speak slow. This is probably the biggest issue with debaters on the circuit, especially national circuit debaters. Like they think that going fast in any way is beneficial for a lay debate, or covering the flow and winning the flow is like really good. Doesn't matter as much. What matters a lot more is that you're actually understandable and legible, that you use pauses and intonation, and you talk nice. Those are things that lay judges care about, and they actually judge off of because they think that debate is about how you speak, while tech judges might think about just technical argumentation. So around 170 words per minute. So I think like 680 word case in 4 minutes is probably pretty good. I wouldn't go too much higher than that. If you're at like 200 words per minute, 800, that's in my opinion too much. Keep it slow. You're going to pick up a lot more ballots from having slow speech, even if you have less content. So the speed you use is very, very important. The next thing you do is you want to get the judge to like you. Um, you want them to want to vote for you. So even let's say you set aside all the content in the round, the argumentation, what you actually say, and how your responses interact with theirs and weighing and all that. Irrespective of all that, you want the judge to just like you as a person, because if they do like you as a person, they're a lot more likely to vote for you. And you can also do all the argumentation right and have that sort of just top it off. But so some things you can do is like make jokes, like throughout the round, make little quips, quick-witted jokes at the start of the speech, have something funny. And that's always good. And cross, really nice to just do that. And I promise you, like, I wish there was like a number or a study for it, but I think it like increases your chances of winning by like 20% or something like that. Just making jokes really good. A second is like, this is sort of anecdotal, but like offer your hotspot if they don't have their Wi-Fi. Just say, hey, you can use my hotspot if you want. Or if they're thirsty, hey, I have some extra water, something like that. Like just be nice and cordial and do things like that throughout the debate. Now, obviously, don't get like too weird about it, like giving them anything they want. But, like if they need paper or things like that, like just be sort of normal about what you're offering, and just being a good person around is very, very important. Show up on time. Don't come late. Judges definitely hate that. Even tech judges hate that because they care about their time. They don't really like, well, some like judging debates, but many just are there for, their kid or whatever, and they just want to get it over with. Next thing is like seem hardworking. Judges like debaters that they think put effort into the activity. So something that I and Rachel like doing is we sit outside the debate round and we like pretend to prep. Well, we do a little bit of prep, but you can even pretend to prep. Just be on your laptop, do something. Judge comes in, they see you guys. Oh, these guys are working, to do well in the round. Like, wow, they're probably pretty good, and they think that you're pretty good, and then they'll vote for you even if you're not pretty good because they think you are. So perception matters here. Aside from any argumentation, content, how you are viewed really matters in a lay debate, and don't do anything that's going to hurt your judge's image of you. You want them to think that you are a hardworking, funny, smart kid that's very polite and kind. If you can get that type of image, you're already at a good point, and then you're going to do all the rest of it, which we'll talk about now. So constructive. What do you want to do in your first speech? So recently, like sole contentions with nice names have been working well in the circuit. If you look at like the national finalists in the past like 3, 4 years, I think like 7 out of 8 of them have had sole contentions instead of like contention one, contention two, contention three. And the reason why is that it just sort of seems like a nicer narrative if you say your sole contention is, protecting peace a path to prosperity, some little corny thing, actually tends to do pretty well on the debate circuit. And what you can do with the contentions is you have two subpoints typically. You can have three, depending on the topic, but two subpoints, they can be completely unrelated. These subpoints don't even have to be related to each other, but you just put them under the sole contention of protecting peace or path to prosperity or uh, something like that, right? And if you do that, that's how you sort of fit into a sole contention while also having different arguments. You definitely don't want to just do one argument. So, for example, if you look at the topic I most recently debated was, I like going back to September, September, for example. Um, Subpoints there that I would use is subpoint A are cartels, subpoint B is terrorism. And those are two arguments that are sort of different, uh, but they also sort of fit into this narrative of maybe protecting the border. So on the app, you would say we want more surveillance to stop cartel juggling, cartel smuggling, to stop terrorists coming over the border. And you can also sort of add two different ones that are more different, like subpoint A is cartels, subpoint B is the economy. So now one of them isn't even related to the border, really. Maybe it's about increasing innovation and surveillance technology, which doesn't rely on stopping people coming through the border like the cartel argument does. So two distinct arguments that you could put under the same subpoint. But what you don't want to do is just have a sole contention of cartels, and then everything is cartels, because if they have a lot of good cartel defense, then it can make it very hard to sort of win that argument. But if you sort of separate the amount of arguments they have to respond to, with cartels and terrorism or with cartels and economy. That's pretty good, and it's a really nice way of framing your arguments. The next thing is you want two to three arguments max. Never have four contentions. Never have four subpoints. Like, actually, do not do that. Like, ever. There's no point. It's never needed. Even three, I think, is too much because you're sort of spreading the debate too thin. You're making all these different arguments and topics that they can bring up, that just make the debate sort of harder to judge. Whereas if you have two core arguments and they have two core arguments, the debate's a lot more consolidated. So this does depend on the topic. So a good example of this is right to work laws. It's a long time ago. You guys might not remember it. But basically, everything on the app fell under the same link of hurting unions or helping unions. So you might have three subpoints that are related to just that big idea because there really wasn't much to go off of. But on most topics, including the ones that are coming up, two arguments is really, really good. Subpoint A, subpoint B, keep it simple. Now, these arguments, please do not read extinction. That should be self-explanatory, but no big stick impacts, no extinction impacts, no nuclear war, even global pandemics is something that I would try to stress against. You would lose a lot more ballots from having dumb impacts that parents think is never going to happen, is very unbelievable, versus the amount of ballots you lose from, losing the magnitude weighing. Magnitude weighing really doesn't matter that much. What does matter is stock arguments on topics. Choose the argument that you know your opponent is going to have responses to. It does not help you to find like some squirrely argument on the topic that you don't think they'll have responses to or blocks to because you think it'll make you look better for a lay debate. Really, it doesn't matter. Like they can concede a contention in a lay debate. A lay judge will not care if they don't understand that contention. So what you should do is your two subpoints, your two contentions, however you frame it, make sure those subpoints and contentions are very, very logical and make sense with the given topic. So if you are talking about surveillance and cartels and in this October topic, for example, a really good argument for the affirmative was cartels because it makes sense. If you put surveillance on the border, you hurt cartel activity. If you put surveillance on the border, you hurt the amount of terrorists that are getting over, or things like that. Those sort of make sense. Those are logical. Those are links that it's A to B. That's very direct and simple. You don't want those really long link chains to random topics or random impacts that aren't super related. Like I know one argument on September was if you increase surveillance on the border, you increase the amount of like pandemic detecting technology, which is really crucial to detect dengue that is coming across the border. And if that dengue does come across the border, our U.S. health system is so weak that it would cause pandemic here, but not in the places where the dengue already is. So like that's like so many jumps and links. Whereas just keeping it simple with the cartel argument is a lot better. Is definitely going to serve you well in a lot of your lay debates. So first speech, simple, logical, two arguments, subpoints or contentions, no big extinction impacts, very stock and arguments that make sense. Nothing weird, stock, they'll have responses, but that's okay. It's okay for them to have responses because you will know the front lines because you will prepare beforehand. Okay, rebuttal. Oh, crossfires, I guess. Lots of lays vote off this. I think if there's like a single sort of speech that lays vote off of, it would probably be crossfire. That's because it's like the debatey speech. It's like what people think of when they think about debate. It's like, talking with each other, not like taking turns, right? Mm. So lots of ways will care about it. You want to sort of have, I think it's best to have these gotcha moments. I think those like speaking slow is very, very important or to like really increase your chances of winning because it seems like you know the topic a lot better than them. It gives them this sort of edge that they can directly vote off of. And they don't have this like nebulous arguments flowing around, but rather they have, hey, this person won across pretty clearly. It's pretty clear that they know what they're doing. They really got this other person. So if you can use gotcha moments, or having a question prepared beforehand that you know they can't have a good answer to, that'd be pretty good. So for example, let's talk about the terrorist argument on September. If I'm on the neg, I'm asking the AF a question about terrorism. Maybe I'd ask them, hey, how many terrorists have come across the border in the past 10 years? That's a question they probably won't know the answer to. A, B, even if they do know the answer they are giving to that is like five, six. Like it's not a big issue. And you sort of point that out, you frame it in a way that makes it seem dang like it's not important to the judge. The judge is not going to vote for it. There's no point. But also questions you can do that are best is questions that are quick. So you don't really want to ask open-ended questions that let your opponent, talk for 45 seconds, 50 seconds. But a question like, hey, how many terrorists have come across the border? They have to give like a concrete number or something quick. They can't just, waffle their way to speaking for a minute. So when you do that, you force your opponent to answer a quick question, and then they have to ask you a question. And then the question that they ask you, you can talk for 45 seconds, a minute, try to talk as much as possible to make your side seem a lot better. And then you are talking on average a lot more than they are if you sort of take this approach to crossfire. Um, and that's sort of the point. You want to be answering questions for longer than your opponents. Don't be egregious with it. Don't be talking for 2.5 minutes versus 30 seconds. But try keep it like maybe you're talking 2 minutes, they're talking 1 minute. It's a lot nicer. Okay, so I got a question about how you can respond to those questions that are getting very nitpicky. There's a couple of good ways. So let's say they do ask you a question like, hey, the terrorist one. You can say, I know off the top of my head, but what my X evidence says is that the risk is increased right now because Hamas has inspired global terrorism or something like that. So maybe you can say you don't know the number off the top of your head because it's not something a judge would expect you to know, but maybe give some warranting or reasoning for why in the world terrorism would be increasing now or this problem is getting worse. And so you can talk for a bit more than just answering, I don't know, right? So you don't want to just give it a quick answer because that's what they want to do, your opponents want you to do, but rather you want to take time with it and giving a concrete explanation. Or maybe you have some evidence in your case that says that things are getting a lot worse now because of X and X. So even if in the past it wasn't that bad, it definitely is getting worse. That's sort of how you can get your way around those questions. They can be tricky, but that's sort of like the critical thinking debate. That's what makes it difficult, finding your way out of those sort of situations. All right, rebuttal. So first rebuttal is pretty simple. Just like tech debate, dumping as many responses as possible. Your goal in first rebuttal should make their second rebuttal very, very difficult. But remember, you're still speaking slow. You're still giving responses that make sense. These should not be random responses that you got off some, the wiki for some tech round, right? The response shouldn't be like an elaborate turn that doesn't make sense to anybody. Rather, it should be very simple and logical as to how their argument is actually disproved. And quality is typically better than quantity here. So a good rule of thumb is sort of having 2 to 3 responses on each argument. So typically in a lay debate, people read 2 contentions. So that means 4 to 6 responses total. On a whole argument, you have 4 minutes for that. So think about how many, I guess, responses you'd have in the tech debates, like, 15, 20, but in the lay debates, like 4 to 6, maybe 8. And you're sort of keeping them not as many. You still want to, get a good amount of responses down, but you want those responses to be good. You want each one to sort of make sense and actually disprove their argument, not just mitigate it, because mitigatory defense isn't really that good. But terminal arguments that really prove their contention to be false is really, really good here. You want them to make sense. You want to have evidence. That's great. Second rebuttal. You want to frontline and then respond. Same thing as a tech debate. Typically in second rebuttal, you're not going to be able to frontline everything. Um, they're dumping responses. They're getting off, 6 to 8 responses in their first rebuttal. In order to frontline it in a slow way that also makes sense, that takes a lot of time. So what you should rather do is if someone reads a response that doesn't make sense to you, maybe they read one of those dumb responses they got off the wiki that doesn't make sense to anybody. If it doesn't make sense to you, it definitely doesn't make sense to the judge, right? So you can just sort of drop it. You should just sort of ignore it. Let's say you ignore it, and now your opponent's going to go for that response later in the back half. They're going for a response that nobody understands. So that point, that's okay. Like, I don't even care if they go for that response because I know I'm going to be winning on the flow in other areas, and I know that that response and no one gets it. And if they do go for that response, you can just respond new in summary or final focus because in late debate, remember, technical argumentation and details don't really matter as much. So you can sort of get away with things like that, like responding later to the arguments they do collapse for. What you need to do is you need to keep second rebuttal pretty slow. You want to make it logical. You want to defend your arguments and go to theirs. One thing you should note, though, is you don't want to sort of collapse on a contention second rebuttal. In my opinion, judges sort of vote off of, or my experience, judges have voted off of, oh, you dropped this contention, you dropped this argument. Clearly, they won that argument if you drop it. So if you collapse, you only go for one of your two contentions, sort of soft dropping the other contention, and that makes it seem like you lost that point. So instead, just try to frontline everything. That's why you should keep it at 2 to 3 contentions. If you have like 4 contentions, it's probably harder to frontline everything, but 2 to 3, it's definitely reasonable. And then you go to their case, you respond, same manner, 1 to 2 responses on each contention is fine. As long as you have one good response of each contention they read, that is enough. Even if you don't have many, if you have one good response that you can backline, that you can win that one response in their case, it's enough for second rebuttal, it's enough for any rebuttal. So just keep that in mind. Summary. So the order of summary should really always be your case weighing their case. So our case weighing their case. It's similar to tech debate. And the reason why is you need a reason for them to vote for you. Like you can't just drop your case. You also shouldn't be dropping their case. The reason why you put weighing in the middle is because it sort of seems nicer. Let's say you're talking about your case. You're talking about cartels. You've won the cartel point. And then right after that, you go right into why cartels are more important than any of their arguments. It sort of flows better. But also, you sort of do want to include weighing. Weighing from a technical aspect doesn't really matter. It's not like your opponent, your judge is going to think, oh, wow, these people have an extinction impact, whereas these people have poverty impact. That impact outweighs there's a magnitude. So if they win a risk of that impact, it means they win a round. So it's not technical in how they evaluate it. But what it does matter is sort of framing the ballot for your judge when they're thinking about who they should make a decision for. And they think, this impact is a bit larger. Maybe it's more important. Maybe I should vote for this. All right. It's intuitively, it gets them to think that your arguments are a lot more important than theirs, or maybe they should vote for you. So it's nice to include. And also, like, it's a great buzzword. When you're looking at weighing, judges, lay judges that are experienced, they've heard weighing a lot. They've heard probability magnitude. So you including those words and your opponent not including those words is important because it makes the judge think that from a technical aspect that you won the debate, even if they don't know how to judge technically. So it's all these sort of little things. Just include weighing, it is important. The next thing is trying to drop anything. In summary, it can definitely get difficult to not collapse. But a great way of doing it, in my opinion, is let's say you have 2 contentions. You think your second contention is stronger. You want to collapse on it. What you should do is you should sort of just frontline the first contention very quickly. Whatever they said in their second rebuttal or first rebuttal, frontline it quickly. Don't take too much time on it. But get something out there so it seems like you're still going for that contention. And then on your second contention, which you like a lot better, you should extend it, explain it well, and then frontline it well because you want that to be your sort of main argument you're going for in the round. So you spend a lot more time on that. You don't drop anything because you spend a little bit time on that other contention that you don't want to go for. So that's how you should do it. And that's sort of the best way of going about it. And then when you get to their case, don't go for multiple responses on each contention. You do want to cover all of their contentions in a late debate, but typically one response is fine enough for any of the contentions you're going for. That's why you just need one response that is good, and that is what you can sort of stick with throughout the debate, and you're in a pretty good spot. Getting 2 responses doesn't really matter because you only need one to sort of disprove the argument. And if you go for 2 responses on one contention, you might have time to deal with the other contentions. So summary is a very difficult speech, but remember one thing, you're still keeping it slow. You're not going fast. In my opinion, don't read off of a laptop. I know a lot of people read off of laptops like for extensions and that. But I think it's a lot more convincing if you're looking at your judge, giving them eye contact, persuading them, talking to them, and not at them. Those are sort of things that you should consider in summary speech. I think in rebuttal, if you could even do rebuttal off the paper and not using laptop, that'd be even better. But I know for rebuttal it's a bit trickier to do. So going off the laptop for that is okay. And constructive, obviously, that's fine. But summary and final focus, try to keep it off the flow. It looks a lot better and it seems a lot better. All right. Final speech, final focus. So literally the same order as summary. You're gonna do our case, weighing their case. None of that changes. The only sort of thing that changes with final focus is you need to be more efficient. You don't want to waste time on random issues they didn't bring up. So let's say in their second summary, your first final focus, the speech right before you give your final focus. They don't bring up a contention from earlier on in the debate. They dropped a contention in second rebuttal or whatever they did. That contention wasn't in their last speech. Don't spend too much time responding to it. You can maybe mention that they've dropped that argument because maybe it'll seem nice to the judge, but you don't want to read responses to that argument or expend like 20, 30 seconds trying to disprove it or weigh against it when it's not something they brought up, right? There's no point in doing that. So just don't waste time, be efficient with it, but same exact order as summary, and you're in a good spot. So I guess in conclusion, what are we looking at? Speaking slow, being polite, and being logical. If you do those three things, you don't speak too fast. You sort of speak in the way I've been speaking with this lecture. You use intonation, you pause a bit, you emphasize, use nice hand movements, things like that. And then you're polite throughout. You don't do anything egregious or mean during crossfire. You're very polite, respectful. And then you're also logical in your arguments. If they say something that's purely illogical, doesn't make sense, respond to it in a logical way. Make your arguments in a logical way. Make things make sense. This is very important. Things should make sense. Things shouldn't just be out there and you reading off of a card that doesn't make sense. You know what I mean? Like please just make sense. If you do those three things, and that's like 90% of the variance in lay debates. I think that the extra 10% maybe comes from your strategic decisions in round, but most of the variance really comes from those three things. I got a question about if lay debate relies more on the first or second speaker. Probably the second speaker if I had to choose, just because you're giving more content that's new from the debate and not prepared beforehand, whereas constructive is more prepared beforehand. But it's very, very close. And the reason why summary matters a lot more than final focus, in my opinion, it can matter a lot more. But rebuttal matters a lot more than constructive. So it's really hard to give a concrete answer on that. Um, but they're both really important. So as long as if you had to choose one, like to carry the debate or whatever, maybe second speaker, but they're both important and they both need to be on their game for crossfire. I got another question about how to practice speaking more convincingly to lays. That's what comes with time, I do think. I wasn't really good at speaking when I first started, but watch videos like on YouTube, watch videos of good lay debaters, watch Nat debaters, and sort of try to emulate what they do and absorb what they're doing and how they're talking. That's really good. Another thing you can do is try to like, it's funny, but like reading storybooks, as if it were to like a kid, like the way you intonate is different. You speak slow because you're really trying to get them to understand. It's not demeaning in the sense that you're looking at parent judges who English might not be their first language. They might have a different first language, and English is a bit more difficult for them, which is completely fine. But you do want to be able to speak in ways that are as legible as possible. And if you're trying to practice speaking convincingly, it should be slow, like you would in a storybook, using intonation, going up and down, like you would in a storybook. Basically, how you would want to be talked to be persuaded. Do not like emulate tech debaters who are just going, at the speed light, going super fast. But try to think about, how a person would want, how an everyday person would want to be talked to. Intonation is good. Pauses are good. Um, yeah. And also, like in your lay debates, try out different speaking styles. See what people like. Ask judges after round. See what your partner thinks. Ask good debaters what they think you could have improved on. Just try to always improve. Next is do lay judges buy weighing mechanisms? Not necessarily. So if you're a lay judge, you're not really thinking this person outweighed on magnitude. So I'm going to look to their case first, and then I think they won their case. So that case then outweighs their opponent's case. So I think I give them value. They don't really think of it in a way a tech judge would think of it. But rather they sort of they think of it intuitively and subconsciously, or at least that's how I imagine they do it. You have two arguments. One puts 10 million people in poverty. The other one puts 1 million people in poverty. They might consider, hey, this is probably a bit more important, but both are believable impacts. So I would say when you weighing off of probability is good because you sort of show them believable things that they think could actually happen, which is what they, as common people or lay people, care about, right? Things that can actually happen. Magnitude isn't as big. How should we be prepping blocks and making responses that are toward the lay? The way I do it is I just think about I find a piece of evidence for a response that I would use in a tech debate. So in cartels, for example, a good response against it was cartels are diversifying. They aren't selling drugs in the United States. So what I would do is I would find a piece of evidence that says that, and then in the lay debate, when I'm actually debating, I would paraphrase it completely. So I would just say, in the most convincing way possible, how cartels are diversifying in Mexico and aren't even using the United States anymore. So that's like sort of the way of doing it. Like think about prepping a response for a tech debate. But when you're doing it for lay debate, you want to find the cards and the evidence that makes most logical sense. When you're thinking of a block to find evidence for, the block that makes most logical sense. And then finding the evidence and then in round paraphrasing that evidence is a really good strategy to do. And it probably would improve your chances of winning. Yeah, imagine your parents are judging is good. Like another thing you do is you literally read your cases to your parents and ask them what they think of it. That can be very, very helpful. Because that's like the everyday person, right? That those are the people that are judging. Your parents all judge anyway. So, why can't you collapse in second rebuttal? You can sort of fake collapse, but let's say you do collapse in second rebuttal. You only frontline your second contention or your second subpoint and not your first. That first subpoint, that first contention, sort of makes it seem to the judge that you dropped it. That your opponent's responses were so good, they beat that first contention and they made you like not go for it, right? So what'll be better, what's most ideal is if you sort of fake frontline it, really frontline it quickly, don't spend too much time, and on a contention that you think is stronger, you spend a lot more time on it. That's probably the best way of going about it. How should you order a case? Yeah. So what I think is like best is like sort of a little intro, a little blurb at the top before you even like go into we affirm resolve. So for example, what reason I like to do is we like to start with the status quo. If I'm the affirmative's goal is always to change the status quo, to make the status quo better because it's bad now. So on the cartel topic, I might start with something like, 600,000 people are dying every year from drugs. Cartels are growing every day, and the problem is not being solved for. Clearly, we need a solution. Thus, we are proud to affirm. So, obviously, I do it a bit more flowery way, but start with the blurb in the affirmative of why the problem is bad. Then say that's why we affirm the resolution, and then go into your subpoint A, subpoint B. Um, that's probably the best way to do it. For the neg, you want to say the status quo is good. Like, hey, right now cartels are decreasing in violence. The border is safe and secure. We shouldn't ruin it with more surveillance. And then you say that's why we negate, and then go to subpoint A, subpoint B. Um, but yeah, last thing is I sort of talked about this at the start, but you really can't win them all. Like I've had a lot of late losses, far more than tech losses in my career. As does many debaters that are like more tech oriented or that put a lot of time into this activity. That's simply because time directly translates to more tech wins. You can prep a lot more. And it still does improve. Like it's more time you spend, more time you prepare, it does improve your chances of winning late debates, but they're really unpredictable. You definitely can't like win them all. They're going to be some that you lose. And that's why sort of like national winners are national champions, it's very, very hard to predict who's going to win. You might have like favorites, but like no one really knows because those three lay judge panels is very hard to sort of win, especially when it's two closely matched lay debaters that do all the right things, that speak slow, that are polite, that make logical arguments. If you have two teams that are good at doing both those things, it's very, very difficult for a lay judge to choose who they should win. And rather they go to their like sort of preconceived subconscious biases, and that's subjective, right? So you're never going to be able to win every single round. But just do all the things I said in each round to the best of your ability, and you will win a lot more than you are now. You're going to win a lot more than you lose, and overall, it's going to improve your success with debate. Which target do you think you can or can't say? I.e., drop probably outweighs. You can say all of those. I think the way you say it matters. Don't say they dropped this argument. Say they dropped this argument. They've conceded this. They be very calm about it. Dropped is fine. Probability is fine. Outweighs is fine. Don't harp on it too much. Like don't be saying outweighs like a bunch. Maybe say it once when you're on the weighing. Our argument outweighs theirs because in the past we have seen cartels decrease when we increase surveillance, whereas we haven't seen X and X. Something like that. Um, how's lay at like Nats? Uh, how's lay at Nats? Like at the national tournament? They're just all lay judges, like mostly lay judges. Well, It depends. Last year, for example, I think there were a lot more tech and play judges than I had expected in prelims and for out rounds for a lot of teams. But the year before that in nationals, there was a lot more lays, just straight up. So it depends on the year, but really, if you look at the pool, um, Nats is historically a very, very lay tournament. Lots of parent judges. Same thing with like tournaments like Harvard, um, and Stanford and Yale to an extent. So all these tournaments are more the big name tournaments where you have a lot more people coming. It tends to be a lot more lay. This year's Nats topics, unfortunately, I have not taken a look at either of them, but I'm sure they're going to be great, and I'll get to that on May 1st. But yeah, do a lot of weighing. Judges know what they're horrible. I assume recently topics have been horrible for PF lately. I will say. I think last year and the year before that, like high speed rail in 2023. I don't know if you guys remember that, but that was a good topic. But it's not like that anymore. They're out. Have they decided on one? I think they're still voting, right? Yeah, yeah. But I'll get there when I get there. I do a lot of weighing. Judges know what scope and magnitude. Some do. I would say scope less so, magnitude yes. Short circuit no. So short circuit, prereq, Lincoln, I would stay away from those. Um, you can do those types of weighing, but don't like name drop short circuit or Lincoln or prereq. Instead, just explain, hey, if cartels get worse, that's also going to increase poverty, which they're trying to solve. Like something like that, right? Just explain it in a way that it is a Lincoln, but just don't say the name because that would just confuse them. But like weighing like probability, magnitude, judges know that. Time frame isn't that good. I would stay away from time frame because really it doesn't matter if it's not extinction, if you think about it. Um, but yeah. And the more experienced lay judge is, the more they'll know about weighing, right? If they've judged like, 20, 30 tournaments because their son or daughter has a bunch of debate, they're obviously gonna know weighing and drawing a lot better. But if they haven't because they're really new, you might want to stay away from that. So really look at their judging record, look at their paradigm. Some judges really like weighing, they say they like weighing, so that's important to consider too. All right. Is there any other questions? If you guys do have any questions, let me say my email in the chat. Anyone has questions. What should you assume lay judges know? Uh, anything your dad or mom would know. They probably know some politics. They know Trump is president. They know Trump's been like stopping foreign aid. They probably know those basic things. They probably don't know much about the details of a topic. It does depend on their background. Like if you have an engineer background, like he might know a lot more about tech and how surveillance technology actually works. But if you have I don't know, like a doctor background, might not know as much, right? So it's important to consider their background, things like that. But really don't assume they know much. Assume everything you were saying is new to them, and that's the safest way of going about it. Okay. Any questions, you guys can email me. Kaushik, is there anything else? You can email bomb me. I will respond. I got you. All right.